Okay, so yeah, welcome. So we are going to do a sound check. So this is a little bit different than what we did before. We're going to do a sound check with Matt, who is the engineer or my producer at Voice America. He'll come on probably in the next, I'd say 3 minutes, and he'll do a sound check with both of us. And when we go live, I will introduce myself first. I'm going to do a little brief spiel, thank my listeners, and then I'll introduce you. I'll introduce the topic first, the description, and then I'll introduce the bio, your bio specifically, and then I'll introduce you. And the first question I'd like to start off with is, who are you, and tell me your story. Like, okay. Basically, what is your story, so that the listeners can have something to identify with, because you have a really unique story. And I think it is the reason you do what you do. And I think it's important to share that if you're willing to do that.
Sure.
Okay. So then I took your questions and I have them pretty much in the same order that you sent them to me. So we'll try to get through probably the first 6 in the first half. So feel free to talk as much as you want, give as much detail as you can. Feel free to tell stories. Stories are always kind of fun. And then the second half, we'll come back in and we'll finish things up. And before the break, Matt will put in the chat room, he'll do a countdown. It'll say 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then 30 seconds. At around the 2-minute mark is when I'm going to wrap things up, have you talk about your website, how people can get in touch with you. And I'm going to once again thank my listeners. And then we're going to go into the break. There'll be a commercial or two. I don't know what they play during the commercials. And then when we come back, we'll do the exact same thing. And then at the tail end, Matt will do the same thing again, the 4-minute countdown, and then we'll wrap it up. So some people offer specials like free consultations or 10% discount if you call me, or whatever. Doesn't matter. If you're interested in doing something like that to get more business, not that you need it, you're welcome to do that.
Well, and I thank you. I'm not sure if I told you, but I've shifted to more B2B now, where I'm not really working with families directly anymore. So I'm really trying to get in front of financial advisors, family law attorneys, and at least until I'm working with families until I can get the business in a box up and running, and I have other people I can refer families to. But ultimately, my vision is having these other people that I've trained handling the families, and I'm working with more, because I really like the high level, do the research,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we can talk a little bit about that too, about what your vision is for your business, because I think that might help more people follow you, so that as, they might be listening today and their kid might be in middle school, maybe they don't need anything right now, but maybe next year they do.
Right.
So here's Matt. Your last name is pronounced Jorgensen, right?
Right.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Hi, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Fozzie. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good.
I want to introduce you to Eric Jorgensen. Eric Jorgensen, this is Matt. God,
hey, Matt.
Like a tongue twister today.
How you doing today, Eric?
Doing well. Thank you.
Good. All right, we'll just go ahead and do some quick mic checks and level checks. Fozzie, go ahead and count back from 5 for me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, good. And Eric, go ahead and count back from 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, perfect. We're both coming in loud and clear. So we're good there. Let me send a hello on the chat. Make sure that's working.
Got it.
All right, perfect. Then we are good to go. We have about 1:20 until we get started.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
You've got quite the setup, Fozzie.
You think so?
This is awesome.
Thank you. I love that I can do it from home. I went into the station one time for photo ops because it was down the street from my house when I lived in Arizona. But here I'm in Virginia and I can still do my job. So it's awesome.
No, it is very, very cool.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I'm making some changes to my business too. So it's really fun to kind of watch your business grow and evolve and become something that's more in line with what you envisioned it to be.
Yeah. What for me, what's been so interesting is I didn't really know what I wanted until I started doing it and working with the coach to say, yeah, no, this isn't what I thought I wanted at all.
Right. I have this great calendar that I use that helps me kind of look through, kind of helps me with the planning process. It's called Clever Fox Planner.
What?
Clever Fox.
Okay.
And it talks a lot about, what your values are, your vision for your life. It does, let's see, things you want to remind yourself of. It does the planning. It does, vision boards. It does like all the things that help you kind of put your vision into place. Thank you, Matt.
Welcome to Focus on Success with Fawzia Costi. Our program is designed to help you with executive function challenges. Our guest experts offer perspective, experience, and ideas to improve different aspects of your life. Now, here is your host, Fawzia Costi.
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for showing up on this wonderful day. I'm Fawzia Costi, and I'm your host today. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that has to do with children and their transition from high school. So basically, we're going to talk about how parents can prepare themselves to optimize their child's transition from high school to whatever the next step is. And my guest today is Eric Jorgensen, and he's going to talk to us about how he helps people with that process. So most of you have probably heard some version of there is a services cliff that your kids will drop off of after high school. While this can be true, there are things you can and should do to help ease the transition for your child. Nothing's guaranteed, but taking these steps will help at least get you into the mindset that you'll need to overcome these obstacles. So Eric Jorgensen is the founder of True North Disability Planning, the go-to resource for families who have children with intellectual, developmental disabilities, and the professionals who serve them. He is the host of the ABCs of Disability Planning. It's a podcast that introduces its listeners to organizations and resources that they may have never heard of or weren't sure how to use. And he is the author of Waypoints, a monthly deep dive into disability planning topics. Widowed in 2012, the same year he retired from the Navy, Eric knows firsthand how challenging it can be to navigate the maze of benefits, resources, and services available to those with an intellectual and or developmental disability, because his son has both. In the beginning, Eric looked for someone who could tell him what he had to do, when he had to have it done, when he had to have it done by, and how to get it done. But it didn't seem like that person or company existed. So he did what many of you are doing. He did his best to make it work with what was available to him. Beating cancer in 2020 was his last straw, pushing him to incorporate his business and change the disability planning landscape. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Fawzia.
Well, I have to say, since I've met you, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a lot from you. I'm really looking forward to your interview today. I know you have a wealth of knowledge to share with our listeners. And I once again want to thank you for your willingness to share that information with people. I think you are very giving, and that is something we desperately need in this world. So thank you for that. So let's start off with who is Eric Jorgensen? Tell us your story. How did you get here?
It's been a journey, Fuzzy, and I think that's the case for most people, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Especially in the disability space, the ones I come across, most of them have a personal connection. I'm certainly no different. Hopefully, nobody's had as rocky of a road as I feel I've had sometimes. As you read in the bio, I was widowed in 2012, and what I didn't share in the bio is prior to being widowed, I was a geographical bachelor. So for 5 years, I would live somewhere else. I lived in Virginia for 3 years while my wife and kid lived in Connecticut, and then I moved to Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Or as Rumsfeld said, the least worst place. Wow. I spent 2 years there, and I would come home every 3 or 4 months for 2 to 3 weeks and then leave again. Never really getting too involved in what my wife did. I just knew that, the trains were running on time, everything got done. And in a lot of ways, it was easier if I didn't get involved because she had a routine.
Right.
And that, again, I don't think that's uncommon. I think many households have very clear delegation of duties. So-and-so goes to work, maybe it's whichever spouse it is goes to work. The other spouse might be a stay-at-home and taking care of everything else. The difference for me was my wife got sick and died, and that wasn't in the plan. Not that any of us planned for that, but
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thanks. I didn't have a clue what to do. And when I'm asking for help, I get a lot of wishy-washy. Well, you could do this, or maybe you think about doing that, or this might help. And speaking for myself, I'm a pretty, I guess aggressive or abrasive might be the term, but I'm very go through an obstacle instead of around it kind of guy. And
well, I think of you as assertive. I wouldn't call you abrasive. I've never thought of you as abrasive. I do think of you as assertive, but I think that's a good skill to have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like that term better. So what I was looking for was somebody to say, look, this is what you have to do. Here's who you have to talk to. Here's some keywords, tricky phrases. Even if they don't know all the answers, just say, look, call this person. It'll get you in the right direction. But I wasn't getting that. It was incredibly frustrating. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to help other families like me, so no one else had to deal with what I was dealing with. So I went into financial services, and I did that for 8 years. 2012 was when I retired. Started working for a firm in late 2020, early 2013. Bounced around through a bunch of different financial services firms because it just wasn't scratching the itch. I knew I wanted to give advice. I knew I wanted to help solve problems. And what I've learned is I don't want to manage money. I don't want to sell insurance. I see the value in both of those. I understand the importance of financial planning, but it doesn't address the bigger thing, the bigger problem I see, which is how does all of this tie together? Who's telling us how Medicaid waivers work? Who's even telling us what a Medicaid waiver is? Who's telling us how to use an able account with a special needs trust instead of just telling us to get one? I couldn't find any of that. And again, as you mentioned, I had cancer. The cancer diagnosis was a wake-up call because the dermatologist at the time I was being treated by the VA. And I've always been happy with the VA treatments. The doctors, I know that depending where you are in the country, the VA centers have some bad marks. Like anywhere else, but I was very happy with the doctors, and the doctor told me, we don't know that we can. So it was what I had was a nodular melanoma on my face. It was underneath my left eye, and they said, we're not sure that if you wait for us to treat you that you're going to make it. Meaning we don't know that we'll get you in before the melanoma kills you. And that was scary. Thankfully, because I retired from the Navy, I have Hopkins as a backup insurance. So I went through Hopkins. Long story short, they removed the melanoma along with the left side of my face. They cut from underneath my eyelid to the bottom of, if you drew a line from your left ear to the bottom of your lip, everything in between there was removed. but I didn't need chemo, didn't need radiation. So it's a win in my book. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. And while I was recovering, I really had some time to do some self-reflection of, why am I still chasing this financial services dream, not dream, but this, like a greyhound at a track chasing that mechanical rabbit, right? Like, why am I doing this? I'm having the same effect. I'm not getting what I want done. It's really not helping the families I know that need to be helped. The people like I was when I was active duty military. I had, a middle class income supporting 2 households because I was living somewhere. My wife and I were living separately. That's not what a financial advisor is typically working with.
Right.
And then I was thinking about all the people I served with, the minorities and the, people of color that I served with, and how much more challenging it was for them sometimes. And as I was doing the studies and reading about how, children who are Black are diagnosed 2 to 3 years later than people of color are diagnosed later with autism, and just the health outcomes tend to be worse. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So it really flared up I have a very, I call it an overinflated sense of justice. Like, I just want to right this particular wrong. And I was done trying to do that through a financial services lens. So I went out on my own. I said, you know what? There's no time like the present. I'm just going to, sink or swim, but this is the hill I'm going to take, and I'm going to own it. And I did. I went out, and I've really made my focus the world of intellectual development disabilities. I'm not trying to be an expert in every disability. I really want to know what is out there for families who have either children or individuals themselves who are moderately to severely impacted by their disability, intellectual development disability, Down syndrome, autism, some of these chromosomal deletions, cerebral palsy, things like that. And that's what I've been doing.
Wow. Well, you said you weren't sure, like, when you were in the financial industry, what you were doing there, but I am a firm believer. I have a theory that everything that we do builds on something that we did before, and it all culminates into what you're meant to do, which is, I think, this. You really help a lot of people doing this. And I think that is, to me, from my perspective, where you're meant to be, because no one else is doing this. And that's impressive. And I think it's such an important thing, because I see so many of my clients who struggle, and, I make referrals to, either attorneys or different therapists, but now I have somebody else I can refer to that might be able to guide them, or at least, as you shift your business and have it become more, compact and in a nice little neat package, it'll help more people. And that's a really nice thing to offer the world.
Thank you.
So yeah. Let's backtrack a little bit. And we talked about services cliffs. What is a services cliff?
Sure. So the service cliff that I'm referring to, when you have a child who's in school, they are protected to have a free and appropriate public education. That is, by law, you are supposed to get whatever it takes to get an education to meet the whatever your state's education criteria is.
Right.
And that means if you need speech therapy, then the school will provide you so many hours of speech therapy. If you need physical therapy, whatever those services are that you need to get that education, it will be paid for to some degree by the state. It may not be to the extent that you want it, but it'll be to the extent that the state feels your child needs to meet their educational outcomes on the IEP or 504. Once you leave high school, there's nothing guaranteed in terms of supports or services. And many families have children who need support with independent living skills. How is their child going to live and or work independently when they leave high school? So this is where the intellectual development and disability waiver comes in. Every state has what's called a home and community-based services waiver that provides for vocational support, personal support, community living support, and residential support. But to get those supports, you have to meet certain wickets to qualify. So that's that cliff. It's, hey, we have everything given to us up until, senior year in high school, graduation, or, right, aging out at 21, 22, 26 in Michigan. But once you leave high school, there's nothing guaranteed anymore. And you really don't know, especially if you haven't done any planning, what's going to happen after you walk across walk across the stage, or whatever your program is when you leave high school. You have no idea what's coming.
Wow. So what do parents do, or what can they do to help their child prepare?
The first thing I want parents doing is registering for their waiver. I guess the first thing would be understanding that their state has these waivers. I didn't know about it until after my wife had died. And, maybe somebody had talked to us about it in the IEP, but I don't really remember it being a focus of discussion. It really didn't come up until my son had already started transition, which in most states is going to be age 14 or 15. And to me, that's really the wrong time, because it doesn't give you a lot of room to process all of the things that are going on, all of the changes. I mean, think about the changes that happen with your kid just going through puberty and how challenging that can be.
Yes.
I mean,
I have a couple of kids. Right. No, I hear you.
And so I want people to look for their state waiver as soon as they get a diagnosis. If your kid's 2-3 years old, sign up for the waiver, or at least understand what the waiver requirements are, because some states have requirements where to receive supports, your child has to have an intellectual disability, which is an IQ lower than 69, and some other benchmarks. Well, it's important to know that, especially if you're thinking about moving to a different state. Let's say, hey, I'm in this state and these are the supports I'm getting, but you don't know that the reason you're getting those supports is because you're part of what's called a Katie Beckett waiver. You had a case manager who signed you up and got you all these supports from a Katie Beckett waiver. If you move to another state that doesn't have the Katie Beckett waiver, you're losing all those supports. Or if you're looking at moving to another state and you want to wait till your child leaves high school, do your homework before don't just say, oh, well, I'm going to leave and I'll worry about it later. Do your homework and what waiver does this state have versus, let's say, Connecticut versus Massachusetts. I mean, they share a border, but they couldn't be more different with regards to Medicaid, what's available. So I really want parents, as soon as they get that diagnosis, to look up and find what Medicaid waiver is available in their state. And if they Google Medicaid waivers in their state, they can usually get a fair idea. Some states are a lot better than others. Massachusetts, for example, has a very good program to help families get on Mass Health and get taken care of. Connecticut, their Medicaid is called Husky, and it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to navigate. But it's still worth looking into to say, okay, my child just got diagnosis of X. What do I need to do? And I want to clarify, an IEP diagnosis is not the same as a medical diagnosis, and you need the medical diagnosis to get services from the Medicaid waiver. A lot of people will have, their IEP code. I'm not an education expert, so I don't think you get a diagnosis for the IEP. I think it's just a code.
I'm not sure. I'm in the field of education, but I don't really deal with IEPs. I don't sit in on IEPs. I do know that in order to get an IEP, you have to have a diagnosis.
Right. But you could get a diagnosis like PDD-NOS, right? Pervasive developmental disability, not otherwise specified.
Yes, I think so. But I'm not an expert in that either. I don't create the IEPs. I just work with them on the other end. So it's funny how there's certain things that you deal with every day, but you may not know the full story. I should go look into that. I think that leads me to my next question is like, where do people go to find this information? I mean, you're compiling it all, but you still, and we can talk a little bit more about where your business is going and what direction it's going. Where can someone go to find this information? Because every state is different. Every state has their own bit of information. I mean, you're teaching me things that I didn't know, and I've been in this field for a very long time.
So I wish I could say just go to the state's website.
I wish you could too, but we all know that's not true.
It is there, Fazia. If you go to the state website and you look hard enough, you can find it.
So you have to really know how to navigate the website. Okay.
Because I built roadmaps for all 50 states in DC that you can buy on my website, and they map out everything you need to do to transition.
Okay, so if somebody wanted that roadmap, they could go to your website and purchase that.
Yes.
Okay, how much does that cost?
$53.73.
Okay, that's a steal. That saves you hours and hours and hours of research. So if you're interested in doing that, Eric's website is truenorthdisabilityplanning.com.
Right. And then at the top of the page, you'll see a little roadmaps tab. It'll take you to the roadmaps, and they're broken down alphabetically by state.
Perfect. Okay. I think that is incredibly valuable that you've actually broken this down, and that somebody can go get that roadmap for their particular state, or if they're moving. That's a really valuable thing. If they're a military family, or a family that just moves a lot, I don't know. Apparently I'm one of those because I've moved 3 times a year. But that's a very valuable piece of information.
Yeah. And I mean, I hear it all the time, Fazia, about families saying, well, I want to move, but I'm waiting until my child finishes high school. In many cases, that's like the worst time you can move for a child that has a disability. I totally get one. You keep your kid in high school, friends. But if you have a child with disability, you are actually doing yourself a disservice, because you're making it that much harder to get services, potentially, depending on what state you move to.
Right.
Example, Arizona is much better than Virginia when it comes to Medicaid waivers. But you wouldn't know it, right? I mean, on the surface, Virginia seems like a very wealthy state.
But they're not?
Well, they're wealthy. They're just not putting the money to...
Yeah, it's all about that money. That allocation is really what's important. Where does your money go? Yeah. So I think this is awesome. Finding that roadmap, I think, is going to be a really nice place to start for parents. And I think it's invaluable, that you've done the work. You've done all the hard work. What other steps do you recommend parents take when they're navigating this difficult situation with their kids?
I like for parents to build a team. On my podcast, I heard it several times from different guests who are also parents, in addition to whatever business they have. And the recurring theme is, we couldn't have done it if we were by ourselves. Building that team of trusted professionals, that team of friends and family, and just having those individuals like yourself that you can lean on and say, okay, I'm stuck. I'm not looking for an answer right now. Maybe all I want to do is just gripe about how miserable this whole circumstance is, or, hey, I'm stuck. I don't need somebody to, I just want somebody to tell me this is how you get beyond this hump. Right. And that's where social media in some cases can come in handy. I'm not a huge fan of social media. Because
we've had that discussion. Yeah, I'm not a fan either, but it does have its place.
It does. And I mean, there are some amazing groups out there that are incredibly supportive. And the coaching, your coaching is incredibly important too. I've given your name to a couple people because I most recently had an advisor who reached out to me. She was a financial advisor, and her clients were looking for help for their son, who has a job, had gone to college, wants to be a journalist. And the parents were worried, and they thought they should be looking into getting him on SSI. And I was of the opinion, well, have you talked to the son about it? He's an adult. You're not his legal guardian, meaning he's seemingly competent to make his own decisions. He's gone to school. He's gone to college. Even if he didn't finish college, he's actually, that's quite the accomplishment. Right. Because people without disabilities don't finish college.
Right.
So don't say he didn't finish college because of his disability. And if he knows he wants to be a journalist, why not find him tools for how to be a journalist? instead of worrying about, oh, he's never going to make enough money. And if you are worried about him not having the skills necessary to be successful, why not hire an executive coach to work on those particular skills, and then take the money that you want to put into an ABLE account or a special needs trust,
Right.
and hire a coach,
Right.
and help empower him to be an independent, by all accounts, it sounds like he could be incredibly successful.
Well, you might want to tell them that I also have a media company. Oh my God, that's so funny. I think you advocate so well to keep people independent. And that's what I really appreciate about what you do is, we really want people in the least restrictive environment. We don't want to peg them as disabled and say, okay, you're disabled, therefore you can't. And this long list of, they can't. I like that you give parents the tools, the resources to really give their children every opportunity to live in that least restrictive environment, make decisions for themselves, and have the highest quality of life possible. I think we all want that. Just because someone has a disability does not mean they don't understand what's going on or
Right.
that they can't make decisions.
Right. And this is something I'm struggling with because my son's going to be 23 this year. I'm his legal guardian. I'm trying to do the best I can, not to be dad and, playing the dad card all the time, while letting him learn how to make his own decisions, have the dignity of failure, right? If you make a mistake and if it's not going to kill you, don't step in and just, okay, dude, you do you. But it's hard. It is incredibly hard.
Well, I always celebrated my kids' failures because I think failures are so important in success. You have to fail in order to have that feeling of failure, but you also have to see the process of getting out of it. You have to be able to dig your way out of a hole. And that's a huge skill. That's a very important skill to have. So, knowing what you did and how to get out of it is invaluable. So I really want to thank you for being here today. We're going to take a break here in a couple minutes, but before we go to the break, I would love for you to give you any information that you would like, how somebody can contact you.
Sure. Thank you, Fazia. The easiest way to get in touch with me is email eric@specialneedsnavigator.us. You can also get there by going to the True North Disability Planning.com website. That website will have links to my YouTube channel if you like short videos where I cover SSI, SSDI, things like that. Most recently, I did an overview of the Autism Caregiver Support Act. I put those types of videos up on my YouTube channel. I have a podcast, ABCs of Disability Planning, which you mentioned on the intro. There's a link to that on the website. I mean, if you go to the website, you should be able to get to everything and anything that I have from there. I try to make it pretty simple.
One-stop shop.
I try.
Yeah, no, I think it's fabulous. So if you have a child who has any kind of challenge that you need some directions, some help with, feel free to go to truenorthdisabilityplanning.com and take a look at what Eric has there. It's pretty fabulous. So I want to give a quick shout out to our listeners. Thank you for listening. Without you, we would not have a show, especially for our overseas, our international listeners. We're in the US, but we have people all over the world, and New Zealand and Australia and Europe, specifically, I think Ireland, and I think in China, we have quite a few listeners too. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening and making our show a part of your day. If you'd like to be on the show sometime, feel free to let me know, and we'll discuss the opportunity to come on the show as a guest. Make sure you go to my website, executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And on my website, you can access the radio show, you can access the podcast, our YouTube channel, and our Executive Function magazine. If you subscribe to the Executive Function magazine, our next issue goes out July 10th. So make sure you subscribe now so that you can get the next issue. And the first 2 issues are up on our website. So you can access that as well. So we'll come back after these messages and we will talk more to Eric Jorgensen, and we'll talk about a variety of ways that you can help support your child who's transitioning from high school. We'll be back.
All right, great segment. We're all clear. Back in a couple.
Thanks, Matt.
It's really cool. You've got so many international listeners. That's awesome.
I do. I have clients in Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, Taiwan. Yeah, I have like a whole variety. And I always joke, I'm like, I think I know every one of them because I know people all over the world. I'm like, I think I know who that is.
But I have given your name to quite.
Thank you.
Unless they give me permission to make the introduction, I can't do it.
No, I completely understand, and I appreciate that. I've had people give out my card to their friends, and I'll hear from them years later. I had one woman who hung onto my card for 3 years, and she finally called me and said, "I've had your card for 3 years, and I kept thinking I didn't need your services, but I think we do." You know, they're in denial. They don't want to be proactive. They just want to wait. I get it. I understand. I probably would do something similar. You know, if my child needed something, I'd probably want to hold off, or maybe it comes down to priorities. You know, what's the most important thing? Well, maybe speech therapy is more important this year, or maybe I need to take my child to physical therapy, or, you know, maybe they have an eye issue or something else that's pressing. So you have to set those priorities, but when the time is right, they show up.
Well, I think the other challenge, because I agree with you, Fazia, but I think the other challenge is speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. People know what that is, right? It's been around a long time. When at least for me, before I met you and we did a deeper dive, when I hear the term executive function coach, I'm like, what exactly is executive function? I mean, it's just so hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, it covers a lot of things, and it's kind of a buzzword.
Yes.
And schools do it in their own way. Like schools say, "Oh, we cover executive function." Well, all they do is they hand their kids a planner. Well, that covers one aspect of executive function, the time management. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of things that go under it. So, you know, depending on the kid or the adult, because I see adults as well, I approach it very differently because I have to see what their strengths are. I have to see what their weaknesses are. And I have a little assessment that I do. And we do that same assessment every 2 to 3 months to see where we've made progress and how we need to shift things. And I love it when a student will come to me and tell me they see their progress, because it's one thing, like with physical therapy, you can see it, right? Yes. With speech therapy, you can see it, but with executive functioning, it's really hard to see. I had a student a couple of weeks ago. He came, he and I were doing a session. I said, "How are you feeling? How are things going?" He said, "Well," he goes, "before I met you, everything was dumped into a bucket." He goes, "Now it's like a nice, neat filing system, and I can pull out what I need."
All right, we'll be coming back in about 15 seconds.
Thanks. And I thought that was one of the biggest compliments ever.
I love that.
Succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to Focus on Success. To reach Fazia Costi or her guest on the live show, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to fazia@executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Now, back to Focus on Success.
Hi, welcome back. So I'm Fazia Costi, and today we are talking to Eric Jorgensen. He has a website called TrueNorthDisabilityPlanning.com, and he has a wealth of information on there. So if you have a child who has some challenges, feel free to go on there and take a look at what he has to offer. Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you, Fazia. This is awesome. I'm loving this.
Good. I'm glad. I'm so glad you're here. I love that you are sharing so much information with our listeners. You have such a wealth of knowledge, and it's really interesting to me because we all think what we're interested in is what everyone else is interested in. And we think, we have all this knowledge, but we don't realize that nobody else has that same knowledge. And I bet, you have all this knowledge and you're probably talk about it like it's just, everybody's everyday language, and it's not. I've been in the field for years and I'm still learning from you. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing so freely. Wow. It's a lot of information, and I'm hoping that our listeners really benefit from this. So, a lot of times the whole disability planning gets overwhelming for parents. And you even talked about it. For you, it was overwhelming. How do you recommend parents handle that?
Yeah, a little tongue in cheek. It's, one bite at a time, but it's true though. I mean, so for me, because it's easiest to speak for what I did because I don't know what's going to work for you.
Right.
For me, I had to stop looking too far out. I had to stop worrying about if when my wife died, my son was 12, turned 13. It didn't make sense for me at that time to worry about what I was going to do when he turned 18.
Right.
It didn't stop me from worrying immediately. It just, I had to get my head around, look, dude, he's not even in a high school yet. You need to worry about getting him into high school before you start worrying about what's going to happen when he leaves high school. There's a caveat to that where I did have to start having a conversation with the school about, is he going to be on certificate or diploma track? Meaning, is he going to stay in school beyond age 18, or is he going to graduate 18? Academically, it didn't make sense for us to try to push him to get out on a diploma. So that kind of took care of itself. But starting to worry about, well, when do I need to apply for SSI? In my case, because I'm a retired veteran, what do I have to do is there anything for me to do for him to get any of my benefits? And at the time there wasn't, because in 2012, you couldn't leave your survivor benefit plan to your child. In 2016, that law changed. But these are the things that were going through my head. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it led me to analysis paralysis. Like there was just too much for me to think about. I couldn't do anything. So I just froze and decided I didn't do anything at all. After a couple months of that, I'm like, this is just not who I am. I've got to figure something out. What can I do to get around this? Well, right. What I needed to do was I needed to stop worrying about too far in the future and just address the immediate. And once the immediate was addressed, then I could, because I'm not going to stop worrying about it. I was in the Navy. I'm programmed to think worst case scenario. I was on submarines. We always think, what happens if, and then right. What are we going to do about it? But when I shifted my focus to saying, what does he need to be successful as a freshman in high school? Let me work on that. And then once I get that out of the way, then I can worry about sophomore through senior year or what have you. It's really focusing on the short term, but not losing sight of the fact you are going to have to address the longer term stuff.
So maybe chunking it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it, of framing it. Yes. So
it's like a long-term project that you kind of break down into smaller pieces and say, okay, his long-term project, meaning his entire lifespan, but you have to break it down into smaller chunks, like before high school, right. After high school.
Right, and then prioritizing those, right? So mm-hmm. I would argue risk management and estate planning are critical, even though they're the ones that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
And for those listeners who aren't really sure what I'm talking about with risk management, I mean life insurance. Life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care, if it's appropriate. But most of us, myself included, are underinsured. When my wife died, she was very underinsured. It just wasn't something we talked about. But that's something I feel like families need to do. But speaking as a parent, how do you do that without feeling like you're getting taken advantage of, or somebody's just trying to sell you a book of goods? And that's where it comes to, you were saying you have a lot of people you can give referrals to. Well, reaching out to somebody like you and say, Fazia, I don't know anybody that does this. I want somebody I can trust, but I just don't want to go on Google because I have no idea how, you can look at reviews, but reviews don't mean anything nowadays.
Have
so
your brother write the review. Yeah.
Right. So reaching out to you and saying, Fazia, do you know anybody that I could reach out to and get some help?
Right.
And that part is chunking it and saying, maybe I'm not going to try to do my estate plan and get my insurance at the same time, because that's a lot. The attorney is going to ask me for all, well, they're probably going to ask you for very similar things if you're going to a financial advisor. They're going to want to know what assets do you have, meaning what types of accounts do you have, bank accounts, investment accounts, all of that. They're going to want to know if you're going to an attorney for a special needs trust or an estate plan. They're going to want you to have a list of names for who can help you, who's going to be the trustee. Well, going back to your chunking analysis, maybe reach out to the attorney you think you want to work with and say, what types of things are you going to be asking me for? Because unfortunately, a lot of attorneys don't have a pre-list of, if you're going to come in, this is what we're going to want. I wish they would.
Yeah, what they do is they meet with you and then send you back with your homework. And you're right. It would be much more effective if they just gave you the list up front.
Right. And that's something I'm trying to work on. I want to make a general list. Obviously, it's not going to be appropriate for every state or every attorney, but I'm trying to build just a generic, if you're meeting with an attorney, this is the type of thing you need. Because then families can take that chunk and they can say, okay, we're going to make let's say we're in June now. By August, we want to get our estate plan done. Well, between now and August, let's look at this checklist, get everything we need done. And then when we go to the attorney, it's probably not going to be everything, but we have a pretty good jump on what they're going to ask us.
Starting
so it's not
point.
so you don't get there and go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people, especially, through COVID, and I mean, it's been a rough few years. A lot of people are struggling financially.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend they do if they can't afford an attorney?
That's a little harder because special needs trusts are so specialized. I'm not a big fan of using NOLO or another type of prepaid or whatever software. What I'd rather have families do is see if there's a pooled trust in your area. If you need and take a step back, do you even need a special needs trust? It does seem to be you need a special needs trust seems to be the mantra, that and you need an ABLE account, but maybe you don't. What are you putting into trust? Do you have money? And I mean, I did a Waypoints article, Layperson's Guide to Special Needs Trust, because of this. It's, if you don't have a lot of assets, if you don't have a lot of money that you're going to be leaving behind to your child, maybe you don't need to worry about a special needs trust, because special needs trust can be between $3,000 to $6,000 or more. And to your point, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So maybe what you want to do is either don't worry about the special needs trust right away, or talk to a pooled trust, which is a nonprofit. They're run by nonprofits, and they take anybody regardless of how much money you have. So let's say you only have $10,000. I'm not trying to sound derogatory. $10,000 can be a lot of money to families. I certainly don't mean to make light of that. If you have $10,000, you could go to a pooled trust and they could manage it for you, and what they'll do is they'll take over all the trustee functions, and, it's typically a lower cost. I mean, there's still going to be a cost associated, but it's typically not going to be the same cost you would be paying a professional trustee and a financial advisor and everything else. But the first thing I think I would start with is, if you don't have a lot of money, really, what do you need to have done? I do think most of us as parents need life insurance to provide for our children when we're gone. But if we can't get insurance, or if we just don't have the money for the premiums, then I don't want us beating ourselves up about it. Do that self-assessment. Do you have anything that you need, that you are leaving to your child, that would affect their benefits, their SSI, their Medicaid? And the things that affect that are going to be bank accounts, investment accounts. Having a house and leaving a house to a child doesn't necessarily affect the benefits. Having a car, leaving a car doesn't affect the benefits. It's really going to be investment accounts, bank accounts, financial types of things like that. Does that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
weeds or
no. I think it makes a lot of sense. So I want to backtrack just a bit and talk about who needs a trust. Who needs a special needs trust?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. This is all Eric's opinion. I think if you have a child who's going to be receiving means tested benefits, meaning, like I said, Medicaid, food stamps, housing vouchers, SSI, supplemental security income, and you want them to have, or you feel that they're going to need more than $2,000 in their name, then they're probably going to need a special needs trust. And that's going to be different for every family, because there's a lot of families out there that don't have special needs trusts. And, the children are doing fine because they're receiving their Medicaid waiver supports. They've got housing because of the Medicaid waiver. They have everything they need. But then there's going to be families that might have higher support needs, or maybe they don't qualify for the waiver, or they don't get all the supports that they want from the waiver. So they want to provide more. Well, that's going to be a candidate for a special needs trust, because that money has to come from somewhere and it can't be in a child's name. Does that help provide clarification?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we clarify that for the listeners. So, because you said, well, they may not even need a trust. Well,
right.
So I wanted to clarify that a little bit. So thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted to switch topics a little bit here, and let's talk a little bit about what, can the child, or should the child do anything for their own future? What do you recommend from the child's perspective?
I'm a huge fan and I hope it comes through from the example I gave you about the individual who wants to be a journalist. I feel the individual with the disability should have as much say as they're possible. And if you're a parent, that means taking what you think they're capable of and multiplying it by 1.5%, because they're probably more capable than you're giving them credit for. Not, again, I'm a dad.
No, I like that. I like that, because you're right. We tend to kind of talk down to people when they have a disability, and we just assume if they can't do X, they also can't do Y. And that's not true.
Right. And it's not even that they can't do X. It's maybe they just haven't gotten the right supports to do X yet.
Right. So maybe have that discussion. What do you need? What are the needs that you have to help you get where you need to be?
Yeah. And be okay with the fact that the individual may not know. I mean, I have a business coach, and there are times where I'm working with her that I don't know what I need, where I'm just like, I'm like, Barbara, I'm at a wall here. I really don't know what you're asking me. Give me, I need some help. Why should individuals with disabilities be any different? If you're saying, well,
right,
what can I do to help support you to cook, to live independently better? How can I help you, get around the kitchen better? Well, that could be like asking you to speak Greek. I mean,
well, you're right. If you've never been in a kitchen, you've never had your own kitchen, how do you know what tools you need?
Right.
If someone else has always cooked for you, how do you know? How do you know you need a spatula? What is a spatula? Yeah,
exactly. Like, I don't think I still know what a colander is.
And you will never need to know. It's okay. It is not a tool that I love to cook, and I cook every single day. I don't use a colander. Don't know what it is either. Or maybe I have one and I don't know what it is. So there you go. There's some things in life that you just don't need to know, and it's okay. What happens if parents or children don't even know if the child's ready to self-advocate? What if the parents don't feel that the child's ready to advocate? And what if the child doesn't feel like they're ready to advocate? What do you recommend in a situation like that?
I would say follow the child's lead, but push gently. I feel like all of us need a little bit of a push, especially because, and this is me speaking from my personal experience, I'm not projecting on anybody. In my household, we did a lot for my son, and he developed what the teacher said was learned dependence. So we had to start pulling back, and it was really hard to pull back because one, it'd become habit for us doing so much for him. And two, because he, in the beginning, he didn't want us to pull back.
Right.
So,
well,
now
I wouldn't either if somebody else did everything for me. I'm like, continue.
Right. And now he's fiercely protective of his independence. And I love that about him.
Nice.
I mean, I love how vocal he is and how much of a self-advocate he is for himself, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's two different questions. The first one of, what do I tell parents? I tell parents that, have you been drowning your child out? And I mean that in the nicest way possible, but I'm a dad. I know, and many times I'm guilty of thinking, well, I know what's right for him. And maybe I do, but that doesn't mean it's his best life, right? Going back to that dignity of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the child, it's, if you've never had a voice, how hard is it going to be for you to accept the fact that what you say matters?
Well, I think it gives you a higher quality of life when you can speak to what you want. When you're just taking what someone else gives you, you have no say. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah. And
that is not truly a life that's worth living for most people. So I think it's important that they get that say that, and from my perspective, I work a lot on modeling behavior. I always recommend parents model the behavior they want their child to have, because our children do what we do. They don't do what we say. So it has to be modeled. And I think it's really important, if you want your child to advocate for themselves, that you demonstrate what that looks like.
Yeah.
And you allow them to try it out and be okay when they mess it up. Celebrate those failures so that you can learn from them and become better the next time you do it.
And let's clarify what a failure is. If somebody walks out with 2 different pairs of socks because that's what they like, that's not a failure.
Not at all. You're right. It's not. When my daughter was little, we had a dog. Her name's Molly the dog. She loved my daughter's going to kill me for this, but her feet smelled so bad. She had a sweating disorder. And so the dog loved her socks, and her socks were always in the backyard. She could never find 2 that matched. My poor child never wore a pair of matching socks her entire life as a child, because the dog always stole her socks. And so she's a very successful child. She's in her 3rd year of medical school. She's 24 years old. She's very successful. Yeah, the socks were not a failure. They gave us stories in life. Those failures give us stories in life.
This was not pre-planned.
No. So, and I don't mind telling stories about my kids, because my kids did have executive function challenges. My kids did struggle with, they had to have speech therapy. Both my kids are preemies, so they had some challenges, but they're both very successful. Both had full scholarships. And so your child does not have to live that life of, a disability or a shortcoming. You can pull yourself out of that.
Yeah. And be careful judging their success on your success.
Yeah.
If you are a successful, high-powered Wall Street lawyer and they want to be a poet, that doesn't mean they're any less successful.
Exactly. You know what? Yeah, one quick little story. My other daughter, she's a writer. She's actually going to journalism school right now. And she used to write poetry, and I am not a poet. She would not let me read it unless I wrote her poetry. And since I never could write poetry, I was never allowed to read hers. She wouldn't
That's
even,
awesome.
she would not let me look at it, but she published it. She just wouldn't let me read it. She's like, no, in order to read my work, you have to share with me.
Wow.
I'm like, well, I can't. I don't write poetry. So, you just have to take kids where they're at, and you have to embrace their uniqueness and their individuality, and their shortcomings just need some help, and let them blossom where they're at. But I love that you help so many families and you share so much freely. We've got a couple minutes left. Any last minute advice you'd like to share?
I guess the one thing I want parents to take away from this, if nothing else, is don't be so hard on themselves. They don't have to be perfect. I mean, we're flawed. We're human beings. It's going to get messy. Tomorrow's going to be better than today was. It just be okay with it.
Yeah. Life is a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but you know what? When you're in a valley, you're going to go back up. Yeah. There's nowhere else to go. So,
I mean, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but like a book that got me through when my wife died was Peaks and Valleys. I can't remember the guy's name of it, the name of the author is, but it was a phenomenal book. And
That's awesome. Well, I really want to thank you for sharing your personal story, all your success with this wonderful business. And I'm sorry we didn't get to talk more about where your business is going. But you've definitely shared a phenomenal amount of information. If you'd like to get in touch with Eric Jorgensen, you can go to truenorthdisabilityplanning.com and you can access all his information on that website. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And on that website, you can access our podcast, the radio show, testimonials, as well as our YouTube channel and Executive Function Magazine. Please go to Executive Function Magazine and subscribe. Once you subscribe, make sure you will get an email. Make sure you click on that email so that the subscription is complete. And July 10th is when our next issue comes out. And we've got some phenomenal articles. In fact, Eric has written an article for the magazine as well. So if you'd like to read that, make sure you subscribe. He offers some great advice. So we'll see you next time. And thank you again for listening. Without you, we could not do this.
All right, terrific. We're all clear.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. All right, well, you both have a great rest of your day.
You too, Matt. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Your poor daughter.
Oh my God. I know.
But,
she's coming out to visit, or she's doing her her audition for her residency program in Virginia, mid-July through mid-August. So she's really become much more open to me sharing her story, but it's really cute. So I'm going to stop the recording now. Hold on.